Imagine a world where everything is perfectly efficient. No one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. That's the idea behind Pareto efficiency, a core concept in economics. But is that world always fair? Let's break it down with a simple example. Two friends, Alex and Taylor, have different numbers of candies. To make things fair, we take a few candies from Alex and give them to Taylor. But during this transfer, one candy gets lost. Now Alex has 6 candies and Taylor has 5. This little accident shows us an important trade-off. By trying to make things fairer, we might end up losing something along the way. That's what this chapter is about: balancing efficiency and equity. Some believe fairness is more important even if it costs a few candies. Others think growing the total number of candies matters more, even if some people end up with more than others. This debate plays out every day in how societies make decisions. Economists analyze this trade-off using tools from individual choice theory and extend them to society as a whole. Let's start by recalling how an individual consumer makes choices. A consumer's budget constraint shows what combinations of goods they can afford. Indifference curves represent their preferences. Each point on a curve gives the same level of satisfaction. The consumer chooses the point where the budget line touches the highest possible indifference curve. Now scale that up to society. The equivalent of the budget constraint in society is the utility possibilities curve. This curve shows all the combinations of utility levels that society can achieve for different individuals. It's like a map of trade-offs between different people's well-being. Here comes the first fundamental theorem of welfare economics. It tells us that in a perfectly competitive market, the economy will naturally reach a point on this utility possibilities curve, meaning it's Pareto efficient. No one can be made better off without hurting someone else. The second fundamental theorem adds something powerful. It says any point on this curve can be reached by redistributing initial resources and then letting markets do the rest. But how does society choose which point to go for? That's where social indifference curves come in. These curves work just like individual ones, but instead of showing one person's preferences, they reflect society's. They show combinations of utility between two people, let's say Crusoe and Friday, that society values equally. Now let's say the economy is at point A, where Crusoe's utility is high and Friday's is low. Society considers shifting to point B, where Friday's utility rises but Crusoe's falls. Is that a good idea? To answer that, we use two tools. The utility possibilities curve shows us the trade-off, how much Crusoe must give up for Friday to gain. And the social indifference curve shows us how society feels about this trade-off. If point B is on a higher social indifference curve than point A, then society prefers B, even though Crusoe is worse off. That means the redistribution improves overall social welfare. This process is visualized in diagrams where Crusoe's utility is on the x-axis, and Friday's is on the y-axis. The utility possibilities curve outlines what's possible. The social indifference curve shows what society wants. Where they touch, that's the optimal social choice. Now let's take this further. Think about oranges instead of utility. Crusoe and Friday are both consuming oranges. We start at point A where Crusoe has more oranges and therefore more utility. We transfer some oranges to Friday, first to point B, then to C. Each step makes Crusoe worse off but improves Friday's well-being. The key idea here is marginal utility, the extra satisfaction from consuming one more orange. Friday, who starts with fewer oranges, gets more satisfaction from each extra orange than Crusoe does. But as he gets more, each new orange gives him less satisfaction. This is called diminishing marginal utility. Meanwhile, Crusoe feels the loss more sharply as we take more oranges away. Early on, he barely notices. Later it hurts. That's why the utility possibilities curve bends. It reflects how easy or hard it is to move utility from one person to another. But there's another twist. Transfers aren't always smooth. In the real world, we don't just hand over oranges. We use tools like taxes and subsidies, and these have side effects. For instance, if we tax the rich too much, they might work less because they get to keep less of what they earn. And if we subsidize the poor too much, they might also work less, fearing they'll lose their benefits. These behaviors affect overall productivity and reshape the utility possibilities curve. In diagrams, we show this with two curves. The red one assumes costless transfers. The black one, which lies lower, reflects costly transfers. Point C, where no redistribution happens, they overlap. But anywhere else, the cost of redistribution drags the curve downward. This illustrates the tension between achieving fairness and maintaining efficiency. Now let's bring in the concept of the social welfare function. This function helps us rank different combinations of utility across society. There are different ways to define this function, based on what society values most. In a utilitarian society, everyone's utility counts equally. The social welfare function is simple. W equals U1 plus U2. If Crusoe loses 5 units of utility but Friday gains 5, that's fine. The net effect is 0. Social indifference curves here are straight lines, constant trade-offs. An egalitarian perspective, however, gives more weight to the person who is worse off. The curves are bowed inward. As Friday falls further behind, society demands a larger gain in Crusoe's utility to justify any loss for Friday. This makes the rich individual's utility less important than the poor individual's. Then there's the Rawlsian view, which says social welfare depends entirely on the well-being of the worst-off person. The function is W equals min, U1 U2. It's like a chain only as strong as its weakest link. The curves here are L-shaped. Even if Crusoe's utility soars, it means nothing if Friday stays low. So how does society make decisions in practice? The process starts with understanding the opportunity set. How much one person's utility must decrease to increase another's. Then we consider preferences, how willing society is to make that trade. The optimal program is the one that lands society on the highest possible social indifference curve. Of course, it's not always easy to measure and compare people's happiness. People are different and their preferences vary. That makes social welfare functions complex. In real life, government officials don't draw utility graphs. But they do think about net benefits, who gains and who loses from a policy. If a policy helps everyone, it's a clear win. But more often, someone gains and someone loses. Officials must then weigh the total benefits against the cost of inequality. For instance, suppose a government builds a new road. It boosts trade and incomes but displaces a small village. Is it worth it? The answer depends on whether the efficiency gain outweighs the equity cost, and how much inequality society is willing to tolerate for the sake of progress. Balancing efficiency and equity is at the heart of public policy. Redistribution might reduce inequality, but if done poorly, it can also reduce the total size of the economic pie. Still, with thoughtful policies, it's sometimes possible to improve both equity and efficiency together. This careful balancing act between making the pie bigger and slicing it more fairly is what makes the study of social choice both challenging and deeply important.